A lot of the time, beekeepers get really frustrated with doing hive inspections. That's typically, especially for new beekeepers, the biggest dread and the biggest frustration of keeping bees, and it's the reason that a lot of beekeepers, especially newer beekeepers, give up on beekeeping and get out of the hobby. I hear of sometimes of newer beekeepers taking an hour, sometimes even 2 hours to go through one single hive, and there's just no reason for that. Nobody will enjoy doing that, especially when it gets very hot and in the later part of the summer. It's just that's there's no sense in spending that much time. There's no reason for it, and that would make beekeeping very unenjoyable for anybody. So you need to learn to make your inspections quicker. Typically 5 minutes in a single hive is plenty of time to be able to assess a healthy hive for most parts of the year. It can be a little different in the springtime, but there's no need to rush through a hive but still be able to complete it within at least 5 minutes, even taking your time. Don't rush, don't bump the hive around, don't pop the frames apart trying to rush quickly through it. Just work slowly but efficiently, and learn to make your hive inspections quicker. And we're going to go over some of the ways that I think that you could speed up your hive inspections and make things a lot more enjoyable for you. Most parts of the year, you're not going to need to look at every single frame in your hive. And typically there'll be no need to spend the time that's required to find your queen. You don't need to see your queen unless you're requeening or making a split or something like that. The rest of the time, there's no need to find that queen. If you've got eggs in your hive, then there's a queen in there, and therefore there's no reason to look any further for her. You know she's in there, at least within the last 3 days, and that's good enough. You find a lot of new beekeepers using these inspection sheets that list every single thing in a hive to look for. There's no need to look for all those things every time you go in a hive. I would suggest not using those inspection sheets. I'll talk about a better way to take some notes later on in this video. But you don't need to go into a hive and look at every frame and look for every single thing that's suggested on something like those inspection sheets. Just get used to seeing a healthy hive, seeing what a healthy hive looks like. That's the biggest thing. And once you get accustomed to seeing what a healthy hive looks like, a good queen right, well-populated, well-fed hive, what that looks like, you get used to seeing that, you will quickly learn to be able to spot a problem when you see one. Something that's different will stick out quickly when you become really accustomed to seeing what a hive is supposed to look like. And that comes with time. The more and more you go into hives, you'll get used to seeing hives the way they typically look when everything's going good. And the more you become accustomed to that, the quicker that you'll spot an issue when it arises. Usually the most important things to look for when you're just going to go in and check on a hive is eggs and food. Next to that is you always want to keep an eye on population and knowing what kind of population you should be expecting for that time of year. But the most important things are eggs and food. Usually, if you have both of those, if you have eggs and you have an adequate amount of food, typically you're going to have a healthy hive. You can get a good idea of the stores in the hive, even when you're not doing a hive inspection. If you need to through the dearth or different parts of the year when you're checking how much feed is in the hives, you can get a good idea of simply just coming through the yards and just popping up the back side of the hive and hefting up half the hive, the back side of it, and getting an idea of how heavy it is. Over time, you'll know kind of what a hive should weigh with just bees and a fair amount of food stores in the hive as you go through time picking up hives and setting them off, doing inspections. And once you're comfortable or familiar with the weights of hives, you'll be accustomed to filling up a hive's weight and knowing if it's really light or if it's heavy. You can get a good idea of your food stores by simply doing that without even going into your hives. When you go into a hive, you can also look at your outside frames. That's where most of your food's going to be when you're in them. That's one of the first things that you can look at. You can look at that right off the bat. You're going to start on one of the outside frames. You can get a good idea of how far in those food frames go, and get a good feel of how much feed is in that hive. Even looking down into the frames from the top without even pulling any out, you can see across the top of those frames that honey, capped honey across the top, that band of capped honey, and you can see how much is in there across the top of that hive, and then considering how much is on the walls also, it gives you a good sense of how much food is in that hive, and that's a very important thing to look at when you're in a hive. When there's not enough food, simply give some sugar water. That's the answer to that. That solves your food stores issues, and it's a very quick and easy fix. Going into the hive, once you see your food stores, you can jump right into the middle of the hive. If you're just simply checking on your hive and don't have any other certain reasons you're going into that hive that day, you just want to assess the health of that hive, you can jump right into the middle of the brood nest and just look at a frame or two of brood. Basically, you're looking for does that capped brood look normal? Is it sporadic? You could maybe have a failing queen, or possibly mite problems. If that brood starts to look really sporadic, you want a fairly tight, filled in brood pattern. To look at that capped brood and see if it looks normal. Look for brood that has the cappings chewed off. If you have much of that could indicate some mite issues. If you're seeing much of that capped brood, is when I say capped brood being chewed off, of course, well, I'm not talking about the mature, the young bees that are emerging out. It's going to have white, immature brood in those cells with the cappings chewed off, and that's where a bee has chewed into that capping to remove usually mites inside that cell. So look for that. Look for a lot of cappings chewed off, and you can see and that brood becoming sporadic. You should test for mites at that point and see what your mite numbers are. That could, like I said, that could indicate mites in itself. But look at your open brood also, and see if that open brood on those frames looks normal. If it looks good, one of the best indicators of that is if you look at how solid that pattern is in that open brood, but also look in those cells and see if each of those larvae is laying on a pool of white royal jelly. If they're laying on a pool of jelly, that's healthy brood. And if not, then they need to be fed. But I can basically break down your inspections to the most simple way to break that down through the season, starting with in the late winter going into the first of the year, you're basically going to be making sure that your bees are not starving, looking for food. That's the prime thing, the most important thing. As you move in, going into early spring, you're making sure that those hives are building up. You're going to be counting your frames of bees, the population of bees. You're going to make sure that as time progresses through the early spring that those hives are building up, and also making preparations that they don't swarm. You're going to have to do some things to keep that hive from swarming, but the basic thing is making sure that hive is building up and that they're not swarming. As you go through the flow, you're going to continue to make sure that hive is not swarming, making room for them, but also looking for room for honey stores also. So that through the flow, preventing swarming, keeping enough room for honey. After the flow's over with, pretty much just going to be looking to make sure that there is enough food stores to make it through that dearth period, through the summertime, through late summer going into fall, that they have enough stores to make it to the fall. Hopefully you have a fall flow that will pick that hive back up without continuing to feed. But in the fall, the biggest things you're going to be looking for is making sure that hive has got a good population of bees, and that they're storing up enough feed to make it through the winter time. And you may have to take some steps to ensure that there's enough feed by feeding them and getting that hive heavy with food stores. But you need a good population also. So a good population in the fall and getting plenty of food stores to make it through the winter. Spring takes more work than the rest of the year. You're going to have to do a lot more things to address swarming, to avoid having that hive swarm. So your inspections will typically take more time and have to be a lot more often during the spring build up and through your honey flow. So that, other than that, the rest of the time of the year, things should go pretty quickly for you, and you should get a good assessment pretty fast on the state of your hive when you go in for a hive inspection. Feed and a good laying queen are the most important things to keep a hive going and keeping the hive healthy. Though if you have those things, you should have typically have a good healthy hive. If you have a hive that is susceptible to mites, then of course you're going to have to keep a check on those mite numbers and keep those mites in order, keep the populations down on those mites. But outside of that, having a good laying queen, keeping feed on a hive, if you take care of those things, it makes it a lot easier to keep a healthy hive. Before you open your hive, you want to have everything that you think you might need close by in place to limit the amount of time that you have your hive open. And that becomes especially important outside of the flow, especially during the dearth, when robbing is an issue. You definitely want to have that hive open for as little amount of time as possible to limit your chances of starting a robbing problem in your yard. But when you're going to go in the hive, you just take and puff a couple of puffs of smoke, 2, 3, 4 puffs of smoke in the entrance, and give it a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes before you take the lid off of that hive, before you start opening it up. One important thing to remember is you always want to keep your smoker blowing cool smoke. The smoke does not need to be hot. If you're blowing hot smoke out of your smoker, you're going to be causing the opposite effect of what you're desiring from smoking the bees. It's going to be agitating the bees rather than calming the bees down. So you never want to be blowing hot smoke. If you don't understand how to light a smoker correctly, or keep it burning all day, or how to make that smoker blow cool smoke, I've got an earlier video. It's actually the first video I put out. It's titled How to Light a Smoker. go and watch that video, and you'll get a better understanding of how to properly use your smoker. But after a couple of minutes, we're going to, we smoked them, waited a couple of minutes, we're going to pull our lid off. I place that lid upside down over here beside me. Pull my inner cover off. I'll go ahead and give a couple more smokes, a couple more puffs of smoke across the top of that hive. And I will start setting these top boxes off right on top of the lid that I placed on the ground. I'm going to work my way down to that bottom box. I'm going to place these boxes over here on the lid. That gives me a good solid bottom, seals off the bottom of that stack of boxes over here. So all I have is the top left open. That's really important during robbing periods of the year. That way you can get something over the top of that hive and cut down on your robbing. I set those boxes off one at a time onto my lid as I work down, make my way down to the bottom box. I will keep this excluder in place. If I'm using an excluder at this part of the year, I will work my way down to the excluder and then move my excluder over on top of that stack. That way everything that was above the excluder that I was trying to keep the queen out of is on the bottom. I move my excluder onto that. Say honey supers went off first. They're sitting on the bottom stack. I've got my excluder on top of the honey supers, and if I had a double deep brood nest, I could move the top deep off, set it on top of the excluder. That would keep my queen in that brood nest box contained in it. She couldn't get through to my honey supers, and I don't have to worry about where that queen's at and getting into a place that I don't want her to be. So I keep that excluder in the position that it was previously in when it was sitting on the hive, and keep that queen contained. So I work my way down to the bottom box, and then as I do an inspection, I'll work my way up. Do an inspection in the bottom, move the next box off over here and look in it if I need to, and work my way back to the hives put back together, and looking in as many boxes as I needed to. That bottom box, very bottom of that brood chamber, whether it's one or two boxes, usually your the majority of your brood nest is going to be in that very bottom box for the most part of the year. So as I get down and I'm going to start my inspection in the bottom, every once in a while I'll give it a little smoke. I'll start out with an outside frame. I'm going to remove an outer frame, one against the wall. I'm going to look on those frames and see which one of these frames has the least amount of bees. In that case, it's this one closest by me. I want to remove the one that has the least amount of bees. I'll shake them off and move this frame out of the way. And it's unlikely your queen will be on a frame against the wall. Sometimes she is, but typically not, especially with the one with the least amount of bees. So I pull that out, and that gives me enough room to move this frame away to be able to have enough room to get those frames in and out of the hive without worrying about mashing bees. So I'm looking for food stores as I work my way in from the outside. I'm looking at these outside frames, and I can see that I have honey stores in these outside frames. So I'm getting a good idea of how much food is in here. Here's another good heavy frame of honey, good capped honey. So I know there's two there, and I can see there's a couple against this wall at least. So there's some brood starting there. Yeah, the next one's brood. So I know in this bottom box, just the bottom box alone, I've got at least 4 frames of food, and that's a good amount of food to have at any single period of time. That's plenty to keep those bees going and not worrying about running out of food and starving. So as I move through, I have been able to assess that there is plenty of food on this hive right now. So I'm just going to move directly over into the middle of the brood nest and look at 1 or 2 frames of brood until just enough to get an idea of how that queen's performing, what kind of, and that'll give me a idea of the health of this hive. So I knew I had cap brood right here. Had some good cap brood. I can look at cap brood. There's a good sheet of cap brood, good solid laying pattern. There's no chewed cappings scattered all in that. So that would indicate mite problems, but I don't have that. So that cap brood looks good. I get over here and I can see a lot of open larvae and eggs in this frame. It's a ton of eggs in this frame. So I know that queen is currently laying really good. I can see that larva is laying in a good pool of white royal jelly. So that hive looks really good, really healthy. I've seen they got plenty of food stores. I have seen a lot of good looking larvae. And most of the year, that's all you need to see. I know that hive's healthy. I can close this hive back up, and I feel very good about this hive being in really good shape, being healthy, and they're going to continue thriving. So most of the year, that's all that you need to see. So as I move through the hive, I'm going to place this hive back together, but as I move through, I want to be sure that I'm slowly moving through this hive, and I want to gently pick, when I remove those frames, I want to be slow and methodical, but I want to gently pull those frames out and gently place those frames back into place. One reason for pulling that frame out to begin with is being able to move this frame to the side. It gives me room to easily pull it out without rolling bees. If you've got two frames that are side by side, there's bees on the insides of both of those frames. If you pull it directly up, you're rolling all those bees that are touching frame to frame. And you're going to injure or kill a lot of those bees, and one of those may be your queen. So you don't want to take a chance on rolling that queen or smashing that queen. So get you some room and slowly pull that frame in, slowly put it back in, slowly push them back together, and eliminate your chances, or at least greatly reduce your chances of killing that queen. And also that helps to keep from agitating that hive. Keep that hive calm for enough time to let you move through, and just periodically give them a little smoke. I'll even give a little smoke over here in this box to the side, and keep those bees calm, and that'll make your hive inspection a lot more enjoyable. If you're in a dearth and you have other hives around, in a yard of hives, or even just a single other hive, you got two hives, you need to, the frames that you pull out, when you pull a frame out from against the wall and set it out of the way to give yourself room to work through the hive, you don't need to leave that frame sitting out. Just like you don't need to leave your hive open too long. Don't leave that frame sitting out. You need to have some way to close it up, contain it to keep it from sitting out in the open, especially if you got multiple hives to go through. And the longer you have stuff out, even if it's for a short amount of time, those bees just start searching. They start searching more and more, and it builds up and really becomes a problem. So have some way to sometimes I just simply set them between the boxes and in that gap on the pallet, but most people don't use pallets like this. That's one way that I combat that. But if you got some kind of extra box to close them up in, that can really help you and take that stress out of starting robbing in your yard while you're going through your hives. But it's a good idea to keep that closed up. Just don't leave it sitting out and have bees start to search for those things. If you're not in a dearth, I just simply pull it out, shake the bees off, and lean them up against the next hive, or either the stack of hives that I got over here to the side. Just sit on the ground with the end bar on the ground and lean it up. Don't hurt anything, even if you got bees on it. To just sit on the ground and lean it up against that hive. But like I said, you want to limit your time of having those hives open. There's no reason to be taking a lot of time and looking for a lot of specific things in a hive when you're in a dearth. You're really just making sure your bees have a healthy brood nest, got food, close that hive back up and get out of there. So really limit that time. Have an extra lid on hand for those boxes you set aside. Just keep your extra lid moving through the yard with you. When you get your boxes stacked aside, just set that lid on top of it, and that closes that stack of boxes back up and reduces your exposure to bees beginning to rob. But robbing starts very quickly when you leave frames out and open, or you leave your boxes open too long, especially these boxes sitting to the side. You start leaving those things open, man, it really can start very fast, and it's very difficult to continue working through your bees when you've got robbing started. Very difficult to continue working without causing some problems. As far as your intervals in between times that you inspect, it really depends on the time of year. In the spring, you're going to have to be in your hives pretty often, a lot more than the other parts of the year, simply because of growth, staying ahead of the population growth to curb swarming, and also making sure you're keeping room ahead of those bees, keeping room for the brood nest growth, keeping room for the honey flow that's coming in. So through spring buildup and through the honey flow, you're going to need to be in pretty often. You got to keep those honey supers on ahead of those bees, ahead of that incoming nectar, to keep room for those bees to store, to keep from backfilling your brood nest. So through that time period, it takes a lot quicker intervals and a lot more work. Outside of the spring buildup and the honey flow, the rest of that time period through summer, through the dearth, and through fall, it really don't take many inspections. Your intervals can be pretty far apart. It don't take much looking in the hive just to simply assess that you've got a healthy population, a healthy brood nest, good laying queen. You got enough food. You got stores in there. That's all you're looking for. So you can really limit your time through those parts of the year. But in the spring, you need to keep a consistent check on those populations and the room in the hive, and also be checking for swarm cells through that whole period of swarming, through the swarm season, through spring buildup and through at least through the first half of your honey flow. Till you get in the honey flow good, you got to keep a pretty consistent check for swarm cells through that period. You want to keep a somewhat of a check at least all the way through the honey flow, but it should be cut down. Swarming should cut down a lot after you get into the honey flow good. That swarming chances are reduced pretty drastically. One way to just quickly check for swarm cells is you can do it from the top. Once you get down into where your brood nest is, looking from the top, you can kind of take your fingers and pull those frames apart just enough to see down in between the frames. Do that, in a good area of the brood nest. Do it through a few frames, peeking down through there and you can see those peanut-shaped swarm cells protruding out from the frame. You can spot those from the top, especially if you have a light with you to kind of shine in there without taking the time to pop those boxes apart. The easiest way to be able to spot them is by lifting your bottom brood nest. You get down to your bottom brood nest, and say you're going to just jump in and look at a couple of brood frames right quick. If you want to first, you get your boxes stacked off the top. If you want to check for swarm cells first, just once you get down to the bottom box, just lean the box up. Just lean the front up where you can see up into the bottom of those frames, and look from the bottom up into them. And there will be, anytime they're getting ready to swarm, there's going to be multiple queen cells in that hive, in that box, and on multiple frames. And there's always going to be some close to the bottom, almost always. So when you look from the bottom, you're going to see some of those queen cells protruding out, sticking out. So that's an easy way to be able to spot some of those swarm cells and catch a hive before it does swarm. But just become familiar with which times of the year that your populations should be increasing and decreasing, and that way you've got a good idea of what you should expect before you even go in the hive. You know if it's spring buildup and you're keeping a good interval checking at good intervals through that time period, you're expecting those hives to be growing. Just learn those time periods and know that hive is growing like it's supposed to be, and that gives you a good idea right off the bat of what kind of health that hive's in. And in the fall, in the summer, after the flow, those hives will be decreasing in population. Just know what to expect with their populations. In the fall, when they start to build up a little more for overwintering bees, just know those times of year, know what to look for in your hive populations, in your growth or decrease in populations, and that gives you a jump on your hive inspection to kind of see that hive's in good shape. Some people use inspection sheets when they go through a hive to record every single piece of information that you could possibly think of in a hive, especially newer beekeepers. As time goes on, they realize that that's not necessary, and they get sick of doing that. And it takes a tremendous amount of time to record that much information, and it is not needed. There's not any reason to record a lot of information from your hives as you go through them. There's minimal amount of stuff that you need to remember, and I'll grab one right here. You've probably seen it in some other videos. I use what I call hive cards. It's just a blank PVC plastic card. I drill holes in them and use push pins to put them in the front of every single hive on every yard that I've got. All the hives I've got has got a hive card on front. And any important information that I need to remember for that hive, I write on that card. And that's plenty enough room for the whole year, a whole year's worth of information to keep notes on that hive. I just use them for certain things. One important thing that I use them for is in spring build-up. Each interval that I go in and count the frames of bees, I'll record that frame count on that card, and that lets me know that hive is building up properly through the springtime. And when it's not, it signals a queen issue. So that's an important thing that I note. Also, if I see that a hive swarmed, I write that down so I know when they should be requeened. When I come back through, when I requeen a hive, I mark it down so I can check later that queen has been successfully introduced and is laying. Just certain small things like that is plenty enough information to record. Another thing that I will throw in is you need to learn. It's difficult for new beekeepers to imagine doing this, but in time you need to learn to try to work without gloves if you can. It makes working through your hive so much easier and so much more enjoyable when you get used to doing that. If you can't do that, at least use nitrile or latex gloves instead. I like to use nitrile gloves, and that just gives you a lot better use of your fingers, the dexterity of handling the frames, much easier to handle frames. And also, if you're gonna, when you spot a queen, you should be able to catch her and mark her, so it makes it a lot easier to find her later on if you need to. So, and you can't do that with gloves on, but you can with nitrile gloves, and you especially can without any gloves at all. So get familiar, get comfortable with working without gloves or either some thin nitrile gloves, and get better use of your hands. Some things that I keep with me: I always keep a queen cage in my pocket, some way to catch the queen and close her up, be able to, if I spot her, say I'm making splits or something like that, I can catch that queen, cage her up. Don't have to worry about whether that I'm moving her into my split or not. don't have to worry about mashing her through that whole process of moving frames around. So anytime I'm going to be going through a hive much, if I spot that queen, I'll cage her up, set her to the side in the shade, or even stick it back in my pocket. Just remember that she's in there and release her, because I have done that many times, forgot and moved on, and pull the cage out to catch another queen, and I've already got one in there, and a lot of times don't even remember where that queen came from. So make it a habit to check that queen cage every time you close a hive up, if you're going to do that. But that's a great tool to keep in your pocket. Another thing that I keep in my pocket is a queen marking pen. So anytime I spot a queen, I will mark her and make it that much easier to be able to spot her next time I'm going through a hive. I use what's called a garden marking pen. It's used to mark the little markers that they stick down in potted plants to tell what kind of plant it is. A garden marking pen writes on plastic, and it's got a different type of ink that lasts really good through the weather. It'll last through at least 1 year. I don't know how long it'll last. Probably it'll last many, many years, because I've got tags still on hives that's been there for a couple of years, and they still look fine. So if you're going to use hive cards, purchase some garden marking pens to write on those with, and that works out really good. One other thing I keep is a pen light. It is very, very handy at times when there's not sufficient light to be able to see down into the hive. Say you're looking through a hive and haven't spotted the queen on a frame. A lot of times she'll be inside that box on the wall when there's not enough light, and most of the time there's not enough light to see inside that box to spot a queen. You can use that pen light to look around and easily spot that queen if she's on the wall. Also, when there's not good lighting and you're looking for eggs in a frame, a lot of times you just can't see them. But if you pull that pen light out, click it on, and look in that frame, those eggs will light up. They'll shine really good and be really easy to spot. So that's some good things to keep in your pocket. Some good tools to have on you as you go through your hives to make things a little easier. You can tell a lot just by watching the entrance of a hive, just by watching the activity in and out. Seeing lots of activity coming in and out of the hive, and a lot of bees bringing pollen into the hive, is a really good indicator that you've got a healthy hive. You can compare the traffic in and out, compare that to other hives throughout the yard, and you can get a sense of hives that may have a problem going on when you see one that kind of stands out as not having nearly as much activity in and out of the hive. Sometimes it'll be simply because of just a smaller population, maybe a newer split or something. But at least you see that, and you can go in and make a quick assessment of that hive to be sure that there's nothing going on. But that's a real good indicator. If simply walking out in the yard and on a day that you're not even planning on doing inspections, and seeing that reduced population, maybe they swarmed, or maybe there's some other issue going on, and it just kind of tips you off of maybe you need to go into that hive. But over time, you'll get more quicker with your hive inspections. You'll get more efficient and become accustomed to what a healthy hive looks like, and it'll be a normal sighting for you. You'll become accustomed to what that looks like, and be able to quickly notice when something's different. When there's a problem, you'll learn to really pick up on that. If you need a better understanding of kind of the things to look for, maybe the processes to do throughout different parts of the year, I do have an ongoing series. It's a playlist on my channel. It's titled Complete Year of Management, and I'm going through a whole year of hive management, showing everything that I do throughout the year to manage my hives and kind of accomplish the things that I am looking to do throughout the year. So it's a real good video series to kind of get a basis of where to begin, better understanding of things to do throughout the year, and kind of work off of that. I'll put a link to that series at the end of this video, and also down in the video description below. I will link that series, so you can click on that link and go directly to that series. If it's a possibility, just try to spend some time with an experienced beekeeper if you have one available, and somebody that's got a good number of hives, and they'll be glad to have the help. Help them throughout the year if you can, and just get some repetition. Just that repetition and going into hives often, that is the quickest way to become confident in what you're looking for and what you're seeing in hives as you go through them. Just doing it very often, doing it more times, you get a real good understanding of what you're seeing. If you're interested in the products that I've showed in this video and products that I use throughout the year, I've got links in the bottom of the video description on every video of a lot of the products that I use, that I think are good to use. I'm constantly adding links to those products, so you can go click those links and go directly to where you can purchase those products at. If you've got any questions that's not covered in this video, feel free to ask them down below in the comments, and I try to answer every question that's asked. So ask those questions there, and I will try to get those cleared up for you. Also, let me know if there's any other topics that you would like to see covered in any future videos. I'm always up for suggestions for that. So anything you'd like for me to cover, just let me know in the comments down below, and I will consider making a video on that. If you've enjoyed this video, I would appreciate you considering subscribing to this channel, and I thank you for your support of this channel, and I thank you for watching.